All right, welcome to today's City Council meeting. We're grateful to have you joining us. As you probably have seen, we continue to hold electronic meetings due to the practice of social distancing. Although conducting our meetings electronically is different from our familiar in-person public process, this is still considered an open and public meeting. For the work session, we welcome members of the public who may be watching our usual video feeds on the Council's agenda page, YouTube, SLC TV, or Facebook Live. As many of you know, there is no public comment during a work session. However, please join us at the 7 p.m. formal meeting tonight to share any comments you have on a public hearing item or general item. Your feedback is always welcome, and you can reach the City Council anytime by mailing us at P.O. Box 145476, Salt Lake City, Utah 84114-5476, or emailing us at council.comments@slcgov.com, or by calling our 24-hour phone comment line at 801-535-7654. Welcome, Mayor. I know we decided to sort of start up the introductory stuff before Council Chair Warden could join us. But if you are ready, Mayor, and your team, we will now move on with the work session items. I think number one is the informational update relating to the Mayor's proclamations declaring local emergencies for COVID-19, March earthquake, and windstorm. This is a 20-minute briefing, I believe. So I believe we have Mayor Aaron Mendenhall, Chief of Staff Rachel Otto, and Chief Administrative Officer Lisa Schaefer. Is that correct?
At least.
All right. At all.
Thanks,
the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'll get it started with our COVID update. You know that our numbers are moving in the wrong direction every day now, and our focus is continuing on making sure our employees are safe, trying to get our residents and businesses to have access to all the resources they need. And we are promoting and distributing as accurate of information about the pandemic on a continual basis as we can. The three things we want to address with you today are the vaccine, business support efforts, in addition to us pursuing this third distribution, the third tranche of CARES funds, and a digital equity update for you. The vaccine is brief. It's great news that we have an effective vaccine beginning or coming our way, but we are turning our attention right now to make sure that we understand what the state and the local health department plans are for vaccine distribution. But we want to make sure that the community is included in the dialogue well before the vaccines even become available, so that questions can be answered and that there's an established feedback loop for any community member to be able to plug in and find out the status or questions that they may have about the vaccine, so that we can increase the utilization of it. We will absolutely provide you more information on what the state and county plans are for distribution as we receive it. To business support, we know that restaurants all along this have been particularly hard hit. And as we go into winter with zero federal support on the horizon, we are afraid that we may see some of our beloved local establishments suffer and potentially go out of business. So we're studying the potential right now for a proclamation that would allow temporary outdoor dining options through the winter months ahead. The end goal would be to allow for expansion of operations with temporary structures that allow patrons to enjoy outdoor dining during winter months. And the path we see to do that would be building on Proclamation number 12, which clarifies the process for expansion out into the right-of-way for private businesses. We're modeling our efforts after Denver's efforts in this area. They've been really successful, and they've also been a good partner to us, providing resources, help us understand what requirements should be in place to meet regulations for the International Building and Fire Code in doing so. So we hope to have those details finalized later this week, and we will make sure that the council is appraised before we issue any new proclamations. On to digital equity, our last piece. Thank you, Council, for supporting the expansion of digital equity across the city. The city's received 11 pieces of smart furniture. They were ordered in June of this year, funded through the Public Services, Youth and Family Services Division and IMS in fiscal year 20. They arrived just before the windstorm, so it wasn't until recently that we've had the staffing to uncrate them and assemble them. Kim Thomas is working with facilities on installing 2 of them at the Sorensen Unity Center this month. And Kristen Riker and her team are mapping out the additional areas for installation throughout our city's parks and public lands. The devices all use solar power, and they will be able to provide free public Wi-Fi and device charging once they're installed. The planned installation of all the furniture is throughout this winter, and they'll be ready for use in the early spring. The internet backhaul system that you funded or approved the funding for arrived and it's in the hands of IMS. They installed the backhaul system up on the mountain, and they connected it to Plaza 349 just last week. The team's meeting with Park and Public Lands recently and mapping out where the potential outdoor sites for broadcasting that free public Wi-Fi should go. The first 3 pilot areas are going to be Liberty, Pioneer, and Jordan River Park. IMS is also searching for sites where Wi-Fi can be available in the winter months as well, like public building lobbies, for example. The City Connect network is now available at Sorensen Unity Center, Youth and Family Administration offices, and Plaza 349. And Rose Park Connect closed when the libraries opened up, and the Glendale Connect, which is at the Unity Center lab, is currently closed due to increased COVID numbers. It's important for us to remind people that the Salt Lake City Public Library computer labs are closed right now as well. If the City Council is aware of or has ideas for partners that we can work with for additional indoor locations this winter, we would love to hear that from you, and we'll engage them. There's pop-up labs happening as well. Haley Leak, who's amazing and ran our census efforts for the city, has transitioned into doing some of this work around helping people in the community connect with their stimulus checks. So she's working through a partnership with different organizations that need these pop-up labs to allow for constituents to sign up for programs like the stimulus check. So IMS shows up in a Wi-Fi with a Wi-Fi hotspot. They bring a printer and managed Chromebooks for all of the events. And Haley reported that in the first 3-day event with the stimulus checks, 114 people were helped, and some waited in line 2 hours to receive help. The stimulus check event ends on November 21st. IMS has developed this pretty simple and managed process, and they would only need more equipment and funding to do more of these kind of labs and events. And finally, our digital navigators, as part of budget Amendment 4, IMS worked in partnership with Youth and Family Services, and they have requested 5 apprentice positions for digital navigators. So if you end up approving that, those apprentices will be trained by IMS and youth city staff in computer support skills, where they can be deployed physically and virtually into the city to assist with our digital literacy, pop-up labs, and other activities. So talks are in the initial stages, but the plan is that these apprentices would work in conjunction with Salt Lake City Public Library's new Navigator program and in partnership with the school district. We're working also to with our finance office and the attorney's office on our assets, our technology assets, so that we can donate our no longer used computers and other tech assets to needs in the community, which isn't something that we can do at this point. Thank you for giving me a second. We're going to transition. I think Rachel's going to give you an update on homelessness, unless there's any questions for me.
Any questions, council members?
Thank you.
All right, Rachel, go ahead. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and it's good to see all of you today. A couple items we wanted to update you on during the second item on your agenda. One is regarding the winter shelter options, and then 2 is just a quick update on the community commitment program. So on the first item regarding winter shelter, as you may have heard in the news last week, the Salt Lake Valley Coalition to End Homelessness had identified 2 potential winter overflow locations. One is a 60-bed facility, and I'm not sure that the city in which it is public yet, but that should be online really soon in a matter of a few days. The other, which was identified as a hotel in Midvale, has not been particularly well received by Midvale City for a few reasons. But in any event, our understanding is that this situation will be discussed in the Salt Lake County Council of Governments meeting on Thursday afternoon. And the goal will be finding potentially a different second location somewhere in the county as soon as possible. And I think the priority or the goal is to still try to locate some kind of a non-congregate or a hotel type setting because of COVID concerns. So while that does limit the options, we're of course still cooperating with the Salt Lake Valley Coalition to End Homelessness in the county and our partners to help identify a second location as soon as possible. So hopefully we'll have something up and running on that second location soon. Any questions about that, or should I move on to community commitment program? Okay.
I'd like to welcome back Chair Wharton to the meeting. We're on update number 2, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Sorry I'm late. Rachel, I don't think we have any questions, so go ahead and move on.
Okay, thanks. So just a quick update on the community commitment program. As you all know, we've been, we ended the 3rd week of daily outreach with our 17 different service provider partners in the 500 West area at the end of last week. And the rolling list of people experiencing homelessness that were encountered in that area equaled about 166 people. So not a running, or not a representation of the number of people sleeping in the area overnight, but the number of people who were encountered there over that 3-week period. Of those 166 people, around 40 were willing to engage in conversation with service providers, and 16 expressed interest in finding shelter or being open to a placement in shelter or other service. Unfortunately, partly because of COVID, or maybe mostly because of COVID and some impacts that COVID has had on shelter and treatment options and the intake capabilities, shelter hasn't really been available over the last couple of weeks. Luckily, that's changing based on the winter shelter locations that are coming online and the fact that the King Resource Center has been able to reopen to intakes over the last week or so. We hope that stays the same. COVID has been a challenge in the shelter system, as I know you all are aware. We have seen quite an increase in people coupling up on this site. So outreach teams continue to make it their priority to place couples in motels as we are waiting for more shelter options to come available. So there are some limitations to the self-sufficiency of people who are able to be placed into motels, but service providers are obviously accustomed to helping make those connections whenever it's at all possible. So while we had planned on moving forward with limiting camping from this area this week or last week, we are not going to proceed with closing that area to camping until we can be more assured that we have enough shelter space and provider space for people to move them along from that particular area right now. So that's where we're at there. And we are, again, constantly evaluating how the community commitment program is working, the ability of service providers to staff that outreach and the services that people in the area need, and try to make those connections. Any questions about that program or other homelessness issues?
I don't see any questions. So no, I don't think so. Thank you, Rachel. So that brings us to, let's see, that brings us to agenda item number 3, correct? Yes, okay.
Great.
Great. And so joining us for that, we have Allison Rowland from City Council staff and Ben Ludke, Council Policy Analyst, for an update on racial equity and policing.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to give a quick update on the Racial Equity and Policing, or RAP Commission. There are just 3 items I want to mention. The first is that the Commission's next meeting is scheduled for tomorrow, November 18th at 5 p.m. The agenda will include reports from the subcommittee meetings. They have 3 subcommittees: school safety, officer training, and police policy and practice. In addition, on the agenda, there'll be a youth subcommittee report. And then the Commission will discuss their plans to hold a listening session in the coming weeks. The idea is to provide an opportunity for community feedback and involvement in the Commission's work. The second item is just a reminder that these meetings are hosted by the Salt Lake City Library and they're open to the public. People can listen on a YouTube channel called SLC Rep Commission. You can just search it on YouTube and you'll find it, or you can refer to documents that the council staff has provided. Agendas for each meeting are available on the Salt Lake City Board's webpage. You can just search Salt Lake City Boards, SLC Boards and Commissions to find that, and then scroll down to the REP Commission. And if you have questions, there's also a telephone number people can call. It's 801-535-7644. Finally, the third item is that council staff is interested in helping spread the word about the listening session approach. So as the commission staff develops this information, council staff will work with council members to include information in your email newsletters, in the city social media posts, and through posters or other sorts of information that we can put in public places. So that's the only information I need to tell you about, unless there are any questions.
I don't see any questions from any. Oh, Councilmember Johnston, go ahead.
Sorry, Allison, would you mind repeating the Facebook link to their the live feed, I believe you said, for the commission?
Sure, it's actually a YouTube channel.
Excuse me, YouTube, yes.
Yes, and if you just type in SLC REP Commission, it'll pop up. I could repeat the details of the link, but I think that's harder than just finding it.
Well, that's fine, thank you.
Sure.
I've got an update on the council audit of the police department. The
Yes.
selection committee of internal city employees met yesterday, and one bid was well received. A meeting is scheduled for next Monday for members of the selection committee to meet with the auditing firm leadership. There are a few items in the audit scope that have been identified for potential adjustments based on recent developments. These include the draft body camera ordinance that is being prepared, the analysis of police officer turnover, the Civil Service Commission repeal, which is a briefing later in this meeting, and the MCOT Mobile Crisis Outreach Team at the University of Utah as an alternative model responding to mental health crises. These 4 items have advanced in the last month since the council audit scope was finalized. And in light of those items will probably be adjusted. Any of those adjustments will be sent to the council as well as the public before being finalized. Staff is also working on what the next round of public engagement could look like for the audit. The engagement would run concurrently with the consultant's audit work. Some of the ideas that are being explored are an anonymous feedback mechanism, and this could be for members of the public as well as for city employees. Small group meetings facilitated for interested parties. regular updates to the council website. There is a dedicated webpage for the audit that will be updated as it progresses, as well as updates sent to the racial equity in policing email list that the council office maintains, which the last time I checked had over 4,500 email addresses of people who've signed up to stay informed. So that's the latest I have as of yesterday.
Okay, any questions about that?
Ben, do we have an
Councilmember
idea? Excuse me. Do we have an idea on the finalization of the contract?
After the members of the selection committee meet with leadership of the firm, if the adjustments to the scope are able to be addressed, as well as clarification on the zero-based budgeting process, there is not one zero-based budgeting process. There are many ways to do it, and that's part of what the discussion will be about. Then we need to go through finalization of engagement. And I see Cindy came on. She might be able to speak to that better, but I would anticipate that process would at least take a couple weeks.
Yeah, and what we're asking today is for the council to authorize us, since there's a gap between your next meetings, we're hoping that you could authorize us to continue to move full speed ahead on this, and then we can email you as soon as we get the completed, the refined scope of work, and then that of course can be posted on the web as soon as we get informal feedback from council members on it. We're fortunate that we have some more flexibility in this process than in a typical RFP, because the firms that we went out to are already on contract with the city council. So we have a little more flexibility, can be more transparent as we go through this process, and can make adjustments as needed if council members have things that they would like to have looked into as a side item. We have to be careful about the cost, but we do have that flexibility. So we're asking if it's okay if we keep moving and keep working with the firm, even though we won't have signed the official engagement letter. I think it's safe to say that the firm is already looking at our issues, and they have all of the documentation of previous audits and that type of a thing. So I don't think there's any delay at all that we're seeing here. Just reporting to you on the status.
So do you need a straffle?
That would be especially good. That would be great. And maybe I just add Ben's doing a heck of a good job.
Well, I would propose a straw poll that you keep doing a heck of a good job, Ben, and keep going down this route.
Okay, so can you specify a little bit more about?
I just think the straw poll is that we continue looking at this particular firm so that we can get the engagement letter before we get it started before and not have to wait till our next council meeting.
Great, everyone understand the straw poll? Anyone have any questions? Okay, go ahead and indicate your, okay, we got Councilmember Johnson, yes. Fowler is yes. Mono is yes. Dugan is yes. James is a yes, and I'm a yes as well. So that's unanimous straw poll with Councilmember Valdemoros being absent.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
This is a question, maybe comment, I'm not sure. I'm assuming this will take several weeks, as Ben mentioned, at least. And we're going to need, as a council or council leadership in January, whoever the new leadership is, work with the staff to lay out a time frame for the zero-based budgeting process, because it seems like a lot of months, but there's not a lot of time in there and it's a lot of work. Is that accurate to say?
Yeah, I think a huge amount of it will depend on the police department's capacity to respond and the finance department's capacity to respond. And so we have tried to keep them in the loop all the way through this. And the mayor's office, the police department, finance, we will include them all along the way so that there aren't surprises and that type of thing. So we can lay out a schedule, but the variable is that ability to respond. And so we wouldn't want to lay out the schedule absent their having a look at what is going to be needed from them and having a chance to figure out how they'll respond. Hopefully they'll be willing to identify a contact person in the department and that type of a thing, so that we can have a smooth way to move ahead and get that time frame. But yes, it's a huge undertaking, and it is it typically would take more time than we have, but we're going to do our best.
And I know we don't know exactly what a zero-based audit process looks like in this, or budgeting process looks like in this case, but I'm assuming that's going to happen concurrent with them forming a budget for next year, because they got to start that fairly soon into the new year. Do we have any sense of that either?
Yeah, I certainly the mayor's office can address that better, but typically administrations begin their budget process in January. What will happen with this is that there will be a lot of additional information that will be available to all of the elected officials as you go through the budget process. So perhaps toward the end of the mayor's part of the process, and hopefully by the time the council has the budget, any questions that you have about staffing levels or what the cost of a service that's being delivered, or a unit's operation, we should be able to have that for you. Ben was explaining on a spreadsheet and make adjustments really in real time so that you can look at different scenarios. Can you say that better than I did, Ben?
To rephrase what Cindy said, the council will have an opportunity to give objectives, such as, I'm making one up here, having the social worker program available 24/7 for co-response. And the information from the audit would provide the cost for each social worker and the associated police officer. And it would have built in to the spreadsheet a formula to scale up or scale down to meet the council's objective. Another way to come at it would be to have a specific scenario where the council would be able to take some of those individual operational blocks and build your own hypothetical version. And you could do multiple of those, and the council could choose one or multiple ultimately that you support. So depending on the information we get from the audit and the spreadsheet, some of it we may be able to do on the fly live during briefings, and other bits we may need time to go back, confirm information, and then return to the council. But we envision a process that's iterative and where the council has the flexibility for exploring those scenarios to find what the council prefers.
And I just want to emphasize that we won't be doing that in a silo or a black box the months between, January, February, March, April. That all of the data will come from the administration. it isn't like they'll be in the dark and we would be imposing something on them. It would be that they would have the information at the same time that the consultants are developing it. So we're hopeful that we can have a really good partnership there on that. And so far it's been just great. And one of the things also that Ben mentioned was the possibility of the anonymous phone line and anonymous email capability or input. I don't know if it's email, whatever, some sort of way for people to not be identified if they don't want to be identified. And that will, we hope, really allow for even, city staff members, whether they be in the police department, in the finance department, in any other department, to share their ideas, their thoughts, their concerns. So we're trying to make that, along with the webpage that our staff has developed, make it a really transparent process. So that's the hope.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that time, and Cindy and Ben. There's a lot of questions I think we're going to have to sort of discuss in January. It sounds like starting about how this plays out with the administrative authority to organize and administer the department with our budget and policy authority. It's going to be interesting. So thanks. I'll wait until the next council leadership and we can talk more about this.
All right, any other questions or concerns? Okay, thanks so much, Ben, for your hard work, and thank you, Allison, as well. We'll go ahead and move on to our fourth agenda item, which is budget amendment number 4 for the fiscal year 2020 to 2021 follow-up. And joining us for this, we have Ben again from the council office. Mary Beth Thompson, John Bike, City Budget Director, Blake Thomas, Director of CAN, Lonnie Eggerson-Goff, Director of HAN, Jennifer Schumann, Deputy Director of HAN, Michelle Hoon, Homeless Services Project Manager, and Tony Milner, HAN Policy and Program Manager.
This is the second briefing for budget amendment number 4. The second public hearing is scheduled for tonight, and this is also up for potential action tonight. The staff report lists 3 straw polls the council took last time, as well as several questions from the briefing. Staff is returning specifically for 2 items. The first is E19, the downtown ambassador expansion. And the council had asked several questions. The updates staff received are, does the ambassador program schedule overlap with the bike squad, the police bike squad? The answer is yes. They frequently work together, but we weren't able to get clarity on the degree, how much they overlap. The council also asked about the metrics for how is the expansion going to be measured? How do we know it's a success? The ambassador program tracks wellness checks, the service provider referrals, citizen and visitor assistance, as well as merchant checks. And all of the calls that go to the ambassador program and the calls that the ambassadors make are reported weekly, monthly, and quarterly. We didn't get specific metrics about the pilot area on North Temple. So if the council was interested in additional metrics, if the council wanted to see if there was any effect on crime reports, for example, or other items of the council interest, that would be a time to ask if that's something that could be done. We also asked about the Rio Grande expansion. If the council remembers, the current service area was compared to a proposed expansion to the Rio Grande neighborhood and an expansion onto North Temple. Bobby, could you put up the map from the Downtown Alliance's memo showing those 3 areas. I think it's helpful to remind the council what areas are being talked about. So here you can see the current coverage area and the 2 proposed expansions. And the expansion for Rio Grande is contemplated as being ongoing, while the North Temple expansion is proposed to be a 6-month pilot. So it would need to be revisited, and there wouldn't be funding to continue the expansion into fiscal year 22 unless new funding is identified in the next annual budget. Bobby, can you show the table of the Rio Grande alternative options? It's the one I sent you about an hour ago. And while Bobby's pulling that up, I do want to mention Jessica Thiesing from the Downtown Alliance is available for questions. And the table that Bobby's pulling up, it shows alternatives for the Rio Grande expansion. The proposal from the administration would provide a higher level of service per block in the North Temple area and the Rio Grande area than the per block level of service provided in the current coverage area. If you look the 3rd and the 4th columns from the left, you'll see text in blue. The first of the 2 is $89,600 less. This is because there's 1 fewer ambassador, and it would still provide a higher per block level of service than is provided in the current coverage area. The column next to it would provide 4 ambassadors. This would be 2 less than the administration proposed. It would be $145,600 less for 2 less ambassadors, and it would provide a similar level of service per block compared to the current coverage area. So the question for the council is, would you like to go with the administration's recommendation to have a higher level of service in the Rio Grande area, or would you prefer to have slightly less than proposed by the administration, 5 ambassadors instead of 6, or 4 ambassadors, which would be similar to what's already provided downtown? We don't have alternatives for the North Temple pilot because the minimum staffing standards for the program wouldn't allow fewer ambassadors because of effectiveness and safety.
Just look, I don't see any questions. Oh, sorry, Councilmember Johnston.
Yeah, can you pull that up again real quick? I'm sorry. I mean, this is just, how many do we have in Rio Grande right now, Ben?
None. It would
Yeah.
be an expansion of the program into a new area of downtown.
Do we have an answer as to why the original discussion, why the proposal for 6 versus a lower number?
I would defer to Jessica Thiesing or the administration on that.
This is Jessica Thiesing. Councilmember Johnston, can you repeat your question?
Yeah, so in the table on the screen right now, there's different scenarios for how many ambassadors to put in the Rio Grande and the cost associated with that. I think the administration proposals for 6, if I'm not mistaken, and there's option for 5 or 4 here with obviously less coverage, less expensive, but can you give us a sense of why 6 was the proposal from the administration?
I'd be happy to. I think it's easier to think about this in in terms of safety, our ambassadors work in teams of 2. And what we're proposing is, so our current service area downtown, we have 3 ambassadors that work in the morning, in the winter from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. In the summer, that coverage is extended to 11 p.m. And so we would be providing the same hours of coverage into that area. It's further away from our city center. It has more open spaces, and it's an area that we haven't currently covered. So we would prefer to have 2 teams of 2, one each in the morning and in the evening, including then a supervisor for each shift that would handle merchant calls and any acute issues that may come up.
So the 6 equates to 2 teams of 2 plus 2 supervisors?
Yes, it equates to a team of 2 in the morning, a team of 2 in the afternoon and evening, and then one sort of floater or supervisor that deals with merchant calls, works closer with our other team to ensure that the issues that we're required to respond to are being handled, and then they can dispatch our teams accordingly.
Well, that's 5, I believe, positions you just mentioned, but is the recommendation for 6 or 5?
Well, we need one for each shift. So it's 3 people total morning and 3 people total in the afternoon and evening.
Okay.
If we were to reduce the number of ambassadors, it would put more pressure on the one supervisor that we have in the center city, both in the morning and in the evening. So because this is a new program, it's a new expansion area, we wanted to make sure that we provided information on the most optimal level of service.
Not to put you on the spot, but since you're already on the spot, if it dropped to 5, would it essentially mean not a supervisor on one of those shifts, or sort of a hybrid model?
Yeah, it would be more of a hybrid model. We would have to figure out who is in charge of managing both of those teams. I mean, it can be done, certainly. It's just not based on the same model that we currently have within the center city.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Councilmember Mono.
Thanks. I had two questions, Ben. When you were explaining why the reduction to 5 or 4 was a possibility in Rio Grande, but not on North Temple, I didn't 100% follow that. So that's my first question. And the second one is, all of these service areas are contiguous. So do we not anticipate that if there's more needs in the central city at a certain time or on a certain day that they would sort of cross boundaries, or is there some reason why those ambassadors are set within those areas? Does that make sense? My 2 questions.
It certainly does. You're correct. The 3 areas are contiguous. The Rio Grande area is about a 20-25% expansion of the current coverage area in total acreage, not just number of blocks. My understanding is the program operates out of a central office location. So the Rio Grande and the current coverage area would have consolidated operations out of one single office. I don't know if that's true for North Temple. The explanation we received about the 6 ambassadors for North Temple was that because of the minimum staffing standards for an effective program and for safety, for example, not having one ambassador, but always having them in pairs. And I think in the pilot program, it was envisioned as having groups of 3 ambassadors for North Temple. Jessica can correct me if I'm wrong.
That is a really good explanation, Ben. Thank you.
So I guess the follow-up question would be, if we chose to fund it at the level that the administration had requested, which is, I think, 12 new ambassadors total, and that resulted in some sort of uneven coverage or higher level of service to certain areas, but we found out that there was actually more need in the central city, does the program have the flexibility to just move the ambassadors to where the need is? Or is it like there's going to be some ambassadors sitting around in one area and there's going to be a big need in the central city? Does that make sense?
The question of operational flexibility, I think, is best addressed by Jessica. There's nothing in the funding or in the memos from the Downtown Alliance that I've seen would prevent sharing of ambassadors between the Rio Grande expansion and the current service area. My understanding is North Temple as a pilot is being treated differently because it's a pilot and it has more unique needs compared to the larger downtown.
Councilmember Mano, that is, and Ben, yes, that is correct. The North Temple area is outside of the downtown boundary, so it is its own program. And because it's a pilot, we're really interested in understanding the metrics of how this is working over the course of a shorter amount of time. For the area in Rio Grande and Center City or the downtown district, those are all part of the same district. It's just an expansion of area. So we can move ambassadors back and forth. And most likely from a logistical standpoint, that's what will happen. They will work in teams. They will handle issues that come up. And if we have issues that have to be dealt with in certain hotspots of within those areas, then we would deploy our services and resources to those areas.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Councilmember Dugan.
and these are 5 days a week, so Monday through Friday, no weekends, or do they split the weekends on occasions?
Bobby, would you pull up the summary table from the budget amendment number 4 staff report? There are different hours in the North Temple pilot area compared to the other 2 areas. And that includes differences on weekends. I don't remember what they are off the top of my head.
I can answer that one as well. Our current hours of operation are Monday through Saturday. And for the North Temple pilot project, I think when we first initially proposed the hours of Monday through Friday, we were thinking about it logistically. Okay, it might be easier to deploy more resources in that shorter amount of time. But to answer the question, the hours can be dictated by the budget and how many man hours we're paying for from our service provider. So if the needs are on the weekends and the needs are greater, we can move ambassador coverage to the weekends. Or we can ensure, since it's the same amount of ambassadors being funded, we could have the hours coincide with the hours of the other 2 districts. So that is flexible, I think, is a better way to answer that.
And I'll highlight in the table, you'll see that the hours of operation are different based on the season, warmer months versus colder months. And then the North Temple doesn't have weekend service as currently contemplated.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Councilmember Johnson.
I think this went back to one of the previous questions from the council to the administration about the coordination on North Temple between the ambassadors and the bicycle squad, because most of the police attention to North Temple happens Wednesday through Sunday, 4 p.m. on. That's the bicycle squad shift. But there's really nothing happening before then, or on Saturdays particularly, it's hard. So I would endorse the current proposal, but perhaps look at the ability to tweak it based on working with PD and the other resources to make sure we're not all there at the exact same time necessarily all the time. We'll be overlapping, that's fine. But I know the difficult times really are Saturdays and sometimes before 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So I would just endorse this proposal, but have that flexibility, have them react to the needs of that area.
Okay. Other questions? Okay. Doesn't look like we have any further questions, so we will go ahead and move on to
Mr. Chair,
our next. Oh, yes, go ahead.
there was one other item staff wanted to report back, the enhanced homeless camp cleanup.
Yes.
The council asked about the Portland Loos. What's the status of them? They were installed by the former road home shelter, and the Portland Loos are in operation. And there's also an Advantage Services attendant at the gate. We also asked what restrooms are publicly available around the city, and Public Services responded there are 27 portable restrooms as well as some vault restrooms that are open in city parks and natural lands, and they're open throughout the winter. There are, of course, the regular park restrooms are closed during the winter because if they were kept open, there would likely be damage to the plumbing, and that would be very expensive to replace.
Okay.
That's it for budget amendment number 4, unless council members have questions or proposals for changes.
Councilmember Fowler.
My understanding, whoa, my computer is like making me go double visioned right now. My understanding is that the $760,000 that's proposed here would be for more restrooms, garbage pickup, bio waste has cleanup, and that's about. Is that about it, or was there something else? I know we got an email or text about this earlier. Maybe the mayor or somebody can speak to what that 760,000 is going for, more specifically than what we have in the proposal, if we can.
Okay.
Council Chair Orton, this is Lonnie. What Councilmember Fowler has outlined is what is included under the Advantage Services existing contract. So including portable restroom attendants and for bio waste cleanup, trash cleanup, and for some power washing in some of the areas. So it's really an extension of the existing work that they do for the city into the remainder of the fiscal year.
I feel like the name we've given it has led to some perhaps miscommunication on what services we're actually providing with that 760,000. As we heard from community members last week, 2 weeks ago, whenever our last our council meeting was, that that this would be going to what has kind of been viewed as or perceived as cleaning out camps completely. And that's not, I think that's an inaccurate maybe name for what we're actually trying to provide with this allotted amount of money. Does anyone else feel that same way that I felt, that it seems like this kind of got misconstrued as to what services we're trying to provide with this money? And I'm wondering if there's, it may seem silly in some ways, but I wonder if there's a better name or way to describe this so that the public understands what we're trying to provide with this allotted amount.
Mr. Chair, do you mind if I?
Rachel has her hand up, Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Rachel.
Thanks. And Councilmember Fowler, I think that's right. And I think it was partly probably my error on the budget amendment of mistitling the program. And it should have we should have just referred back to the enhanced neighborhood cleaning, which is really sort of the phase 1 community commitment program. program on, you know, how to get increased cleaning into neighborhoods not where people are literally camping at the moment, but helping businesses and residents clean around, you know, their areas and on public and private property. So that's really what this is about, and it's being able to fund that additional cleaning through the rest of the year. I think you're totally right that it was mislabeled in the budget amendment, and we didn't really correct it. So I apologize for that.
No, I appreciate the administration getting back. I know we asked this question at the last meeting, so I appreciate getting back, because it also helps me clarify what this was going for. Because I'll be honest, when I first looked at it, I thought, I don't know if I think 760,000 needs to go to this. But when we're talking about actually providing services, including bathroom attendees and making sure that porta potties are accessible to people throughout the winter, that certainly changes my attitude about it, because I believe that those services are necessary for all of our community members, including and especially those experiencing homelessness. And so I appreciate the update, and think that if there's a way for us to maybe update a little bit in the budget amendment or through however we can kind of do that so that we get the accurate information out to the community, that'd be helpful.
Thanks. Yeah, and you'll remember too that we essentially asked you if we could exhaust HAN's budget the first time around to make this program work, and I think it has been successful and needed, and we'd like to keep doing it and keep hand working for the rest of the year too. So thanks for your understanding and support on that. We did also send, thanks to Mary Beth, an additional breakdown of expenses under that item. And so hopefully council staff received that. I probably was a little bit late for you to be able to review with your packets, but I hope that helps.
To Councilmember Fowler's point, on the adoption motion sheet, we can rename this item, potentially Community Commitment Program Additional Funding, if that's better.
That, or maybe, Rachel, you said it, neighborhood, what is it? The neighborhood, maybe Lonnie knows the name of what it is.
I think we were calling it the Enhanced Neighborhood Cleaning. Lonnie's nodding, so I think I got it right.
So Ben, maybe we can work maybe with administration and Lonnie to come up with like what that name is, so that we are consistent as well with what we did before, and that this is simply just adding on to that program that we know is working and we want to continue, and put that in the motion sheet perhaps.
Will do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
That's it.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Mary Beth, and Lonnie and Blake. Thanks to all of you for being here. Let's move on then to agenda item number 5, which is budget amendment number 5 for fiscal year 2020 to 2021. We've got the same list of folks here. So let's hop right back into it.
All right, budget amendment number 5. This is the first briefing for the council. The second public hearing is scheduled for tonight. Potential action is scheduled in December. Budget amendment number 5 is over $49 million, of which $2.7 million is recommended to come from fund balance. It's important to note that out of that $49 million, 2 of it comes from 2 large items. One of them is $20.5 million for the latest bond issuance of the voter-approved streets reconstruction bond. The other is $15 million for the landfill construction budget, and the landfill construction budget is a pass-through. The city's reimbursed for that. There is a total of 36 items. There are 15 in section A that we'll go through, and then there are 3 in section D to go through. The amendment also includes 14 proposed new full-time employees. We've received a couple of updates, several updates since the staff report was published, and I'll point those out as we go. The administration is also requesting 4 straw polls, and I'll identify those when we get to them. We don't have a revenue update. The council heard a revenue update particular to sales tax last Tuesday. Fund balance update. If this budget amendment is approved as proposed by the administration, fund balance would drop to 11.7%. This is $4 million below the 13% target, but it's still above the 10% minimum that bond counsel has told us is an important threshold when it comes to bond ratings. Item A1 is a request for $44,000 for the animal services contract with the county. When this was under negotiation, the council was deliberating the fiscal year 21 annual budget. It was hoped that the cost would stay flat, but it increased $44,000, partially to cover raccoon abatement. This is a 2.5% increase. The overall contract is $1.8 million. A2 is a request for $55,000 from the refuse fund. Sustainability oversees that, to purchase a pickup truck. There was a 10-year-old pickup truck that had major engine issues, and the fleet division determined it made more financial sense to just buy a new truck instead of replace the engine or try to fix the engine. The $55,000 would come from available cash. And this item, a straw poll is requested so they can place the order. The pickup trucks and mini vehicles are back ordered, so the sooner they can place the order, the better.
Okay, no questions there.
Did anyone want to take a straw poll, Mr. Chair?
Oh, sorry, yeah. Councilmember Johnston? Yes.
I didn't know that was the end of the briefing piece. This is probably a Mary Beth or Mayor question primarily. With this budget amendment, Ben, you said we'd be down to 11.7% for fund balance?
Correct.
And that leaves us, with my social worker math, probably 3 million above the 10%, give or take. Okay. I'm just sort of projecting forward that I'm fine using fund balance to help us through this time because that's why we have it, in my personal opinion. But are we projecting that 3 million sort of to be used in the next fiscal year through July, June, or are we thinking to hold some of that for next year as well? Any sense of that, Mayor? This is all projection, by the way, and made up. But
Did you want me to reply?
yeah, I'm just trying to get a sense of what our sort of, in the thought process going forward, is there a goal or any idea in your head about how much fund balance you'd like to see moving into the next fiscal year? I'm assuming tax revenues are still down and other issues are still.
Well, I'm going to queue up Mary Beth because we have been relying since we made our budget recommendation in May on her projections, which has been, I think, pretty good, really. And Councilmember Johnston, you know that when I was a council member, I liked working with you to try to get our fund balance well up above 11%. And I'd be most comfortable if we stayed above 11%. But we, I think as we've been navigating this economic territory through the pandemic, we've been incredibly fortunate compared to other cities around the state. So I don't feel that where we've gone to and what we're proposing to you is much out of my comfort zone, given the circumstances that we find ourselves in. But I think Mary Beth's projections are still very good for us. Mary Beth, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so what I will say is these projections are from last year, and until we get the CAFR completed, I won't have exactly what the fund balance looks like for fiscal year 2020, right? That won't happen until mid to end December. I don't see it going down. I see it, crossing my fingers, going up a little bit. So that's good news instead of bad news. And I'm hoping that, we can keep some of this going into next fiscal year, because I don't see that we're going to recover fully next fiscal year. What I will also say and reiterate what the mayor said is that in looking at other cities, and we're working with the Bloomberg grant with other cities, I think Salt Lake City is, it was good that we positioned ourselves so well in fiscal year 19 to have a balance of 20%. So I think we're fortunate for that, because, and for you, Councilmember Johnston, in keeping our fund balance to a significant level in order for us to have that funding for these times.
I know this is non-binding, Mayor, and I won't hold anybody to it. I think in my mind now, in the council mind, I'm trying to figure out, is there a target to try and maintain for the rest of this fiscal year? And 11% seems as good as anything. You brought it up. As maybe a target for us in just thinking through our budget for the next 6 months or 7 months. And like I said, it's non-binding. I think as stuff comes up, we're going to have to make some decisions. And in my view, there are times we need to use this fund balance. But I think if everything is equal, and I really hope, Mary Beth, you're exactly right about our projections and how the tax revenue will happen. But I'd like to see us try and keep it as close to 11 as possible if we could. So I'm just putting that out there.
Councilmember, I think this is what fund balance is for. It's for times like this, when what we have had planned isn't coming through, and we've built up, and we did build up with the budget that you approved in June, the ability for the city to maintain all of our employees, meaning we didn't have to do any furloughs, and all of our city services. And that's what a fund balance is there for. It's for this flexibility that is necessary during these kind of times. So I am not my focus right now is maintaining the wellness of our corporation, and as we go through this unpredictable storm that we're in. And I know that, and I hope you know that I have been historically, and I'm still very committed to us having a strong fund balance, but this is what fund balances are for. And I'm going to keep relying on the advice of Mary Beth and her team if we get toward a point in the future where we are going too deep into that fund balance. But of course, that's a policy discussion as well.
Sure, I understand, Mayor, and I know in my first 2 years in the council, we always flirted somewhere between 10 and 11% in good years. And then we've changed that perspective for the reason you said. I think I want to make sure that we're in the headspace of we may need some going into next fiscal year. So ensuring that we are careful in the next 6 months, particularly as we watch the revenues and things. So that's all. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Did anyone want to propose a straw poll?
And I'll just reiterate, Mr. Chair, this 55,000 is from the refuse fund, not fund balance. And the same is true for the next item we'll get to.
Mr. Chair, I propose that we support the allocation of this 55,000 to refuse, a garbage truck.
Okay, does anyone have any questions about the straw poll? Okay, go ahead and indicate your thoughts. I have a thumbs up from Councilmember Dugan, Mono, Rogers, Johnston, Fowler, and myself. That's unanimous support with one absent, Councilmember Valdemoros. Thanks,
That takes us to A3. This is a request for $2.6 million from the refuse fund for 7 certified natural gas refuse packers. There is a long backlog on getting these specialized vehicles ordered and delivered. The backlog, according to sustainability, is over 12 months. So this also has a straw poll requested, and they likely wouldn't be delivered until sometime in fiscal year 2022. These would be financed over 4 years, and the interest rates remain historically low, which is why this is a viable option. The city sustainability has 35 of these vehicles, which does include a couple redundancies in case one of them breaks down. It won't result in a service level decrease. So this would be 7 new packers paid for by the refuse fund over a 4-year financing term. And it's a straw poll that's requested by the administration.
Okay. Any questions first? Councilmember Dugan?
Just the basic finance. So the 2.6 million is for this fiscal year, and that's times 4, or just 2.6 spread over four years with interest?
I believe it's spread over 4 years.
Okay, so the impact of this fiscal year would be quite a bit less.
This is creating the budget. The actual payment probably wouldn't be booked until next fiscal year.
Okay.
All right, unless there are other questions, I'll ask for a straw poll.
Mr. Chair, I would
Yes.
propose the council supports A3, the purchase of 7 certified natural gas refuse packers.
Everyone understand the straw poll? Okay, go ahead and indicate your support. And I have support from Councilmember Johnston, Dugan, Mono, Rogers, Fowler, and myself. With so it's unanimous support with one absence, Councilmember Valdemoros.
The next item is A4, a request for almost $316,000 from fund balance for public safety costs related to the vice presidential debate. The Salt Lake City Police Department participated in the Unified Command operations, which included the Secret Service, the University of Utah Police, as well as other agencies. Those costs for the Unified Command were tracked separately to facilitate reimbursement. This request for $316,000 is for the police department's specific operations. It includes $156,000 of overtime, $65,000 to backfill patrol to maintain minimum staffing in the patrol, $94,000 for miscellaneous expenses, and this is things like traffic equipment, vehicle rentals, and training of officers before the operation started. And there is a small reimbursement from the University of Utah that's anticipated, about $19,000.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead, Councilmember
That's
Johnson.
a question. I know that there's an answer to it, but why is there only $19,000 in reimbursable expenses here?
I do not know. I don't know if we have a ready answer. I see Mary Beth shaking her head no. I will ask and come back.
I mean, look, it's money we got to spend because it's already happened. I hate the event personally, but this is frustrating to have an event that we don't solicit as a city, and yet we're on the hook to pay the bills for, essentially. So I'm frustrated by that.
A5, this is a request for $7.1 million from HUD in CARES Act grants. This is one-time money. You may remember this from briefings last month. On October 13th, the council had a briefing about amending the 2020-2024 consolidated plan, which lays out the objectives and uses of these grant funds from HUD. The council amended that plan and the one-year action plan on October 20th. This request is to establish the budget to accept those funds. The Housing and Neighborhood Development Division is currently accepting applications until November 22nd for community organizations that are proposing how to use these one-time grant funds. Those will go to an advisory board that'll make a funding recommendation. The mayor will make a second set of funding recommendations. And then the council will receive both funding recommendation sets and make the final decisions on how to spend the funds. This mirrors the process we use every year with the ongoing dollars. This request is also asking the council to approve the administrative portion of the grants. HUD allows cities to take a portion of the grant in recognition that it takes staff time and expenses to administer these grant programs. The amounts that are allowed are 20% of the CDBG award, 10% of ESG, and 6% of HOPWA. The administration is asking the council to approve those administrative portions as part of the budget amendment. Normally, the council approves the administrative portions at the same time that the council approves the awards to the community organizations. If the council approves the administrative portions as part of this budget amendment, that means there's less flexibility in the future if the council wanted to award less to the city for administrative costs and wanted to shift some of those dollars to a community application. The council has done that a couple times, but I do want to point out that that would be a change in your flexibility compared to the typical process. The administration wants the approval earlier for the administrative costs so they can hire 2 positions that would help administer the program, which are currently held vacant under the hiring freeze. There's a grant specialist and a grant administration supervisor. Both of them would be hired 2 months sooner if the council approved this. And it's important to note that finance and the attorney's office also receive a portion of those administrative costs because they're involved in the contracts with HUD as well as with the community organizations. There was an update after we published the staff report that the administration is also recommending 3 new FTEs that would be funded with this grant. We haven't received a new transmittal detailing that, so I would let the administration speak to it today, unless they would prefer to address it at a follow-up briefing.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question before Blake goes, because he may be able to answer this question as well?
Yes, go ahead.
Thanks. I mean, this grant is a one-time grant, right? So would we, but we get it every year, it's just not guaranteed necessarily, right? And so how do we continue funding the 3 new FTEs? Does it come out of this grant every year as well? Does that make sense, what I'm asking? I'm asking future funds, Dean.
Yes, that makes sense to me if it's okay to respond, Chair Wharton.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, so those 3 positions, those are temporary roles, and I've spoken with the hand team and we're willing to have those be temps or part-time employees in terms of preventing a 3-person FTE count that we might be tempted to come back and try to extend that beyond the couple of years of the program. So those positions will be funded from the 7.1 million, and they will be temporary only for the life of this one-time CARES HUD CV dollars, if that if that helps answer your question.
Okay, any other questions? Oh, Mary Beth, go ahead.
Thank you, Council Chair. So we will keep these positions in the grant fund. So once the grant funding has been expended and the grant has expired, then that funding will go away. These temporary or FTEs won't sit in the general fund. It'll all sit in the grant fund, like other grant funding positions do currently.
And if I could, maybe Blake could also address the 2 FTEs that would be funded by this money. You were saying, we were talking earlier, you thought maybe there was general fund savings or something that might cover part of this?
Yeah, thank you, Cindy Gus Jensen, for pointing that out. So another thing that I'd like to do is, I guess this would be a formal request to have those 2 requests removed, as those are separate, to Mary Beth's point, from grant specific positions. So we'll remove those if that's amenable with the group, so that when we're able to fill those with agency savings above and beyond what has been required to meet our requirements through this year, we hope to fill those, and then hope to fill the vacancies when the freeze hopefully ends. But we know that we just can't have perfect certainty of that. So my request is to remove those 2 from the ask, as the 3 positions that are tied to the HUD $7.1 million are truly temporary employees that are tethered to that program.
And maybe what we could do, if the council's okay, is not do anything specific today, but just circle back with Blake and the mayor's office and finance to be sure that we're not missing any important points, because this is all, we don't have written information yet. And so if you could just give us a little bit of time on this agenda item, we could work together to see what we can confirm.
Okay. I'm fine with that. Do we need a straw poll for that, or? Okay, great. Back to you, Ben.
We're on A6. This is a budget neutral request for fiscal year 21. Finance is asking for the consumer protection analyst to be added to the staffing document. This position has been funded for 2 years by a grant, which expires at the end of the calendar year. Finance would use their portion of the administrative costs from the previous item to cover the remaining 6 months for this FTE. That means in fiscal year 22, funding for this consumer protection analyst would be added to the finance department's base budget. The consumer protection analyst works closely with the civil enforcement unit in Cannes and focuses on landlord and tenant issues. Some specific examples are mediation services, pest control, timeliness of repairs, and landlord references.
Any questions on that? Oh, okay, thank you.
A7 is a request for almost $35,000 for the Economic Development Department Deputy Director. This funding would be to hire the position before the end of the 6-month hiring freeze.
Questions on that? Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Councilmember Johnson.
I'm just intrigued by the timing. Why now?
Is there someone who?
It looks like Ben Collender is on the call. There he is.
There he is.
Mr. Chair, I'm happy to chime in and give my best answer to this, but as many of the council know, we've been without a deputy now for about a year and a half, and obviously our operations have been strained. We have been requesting this in various budget openings, and this one is one that the mayor's office has supported. So in terms of timing, it's just within the budget opening. It is a need for our department that's definitely held back some of our operations.
Councilmember Johnson, does that answer your question, or do you have additional?
Yeah, I mean, we can say that for all sorts of positions across the city. I didn't know if there.
Oh, you just muted.
Sorry. We can say that across multiple positions across the city. I was just wondering if there's something in ED right now in the next 6 months that had to be happening. We should be aware of.
I would just say, in terms of our operations within the pandemic and how we're responsive to the community, a lot of the coordination that takes place in terms of drafting considerations for the city, I mean, that's one substantial impact as we try and respond and get feedback into the city about how we can consider everything from the outdoor dining provisions that were discussed earlier to potentially even looking ahead, identifying resources for the city as well for potential grants. You know, there have been a lot of impacts on having that position vacant for the department.
Rachel Otto, you had your hand up as well.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I would just add that I think we are asking, as Councilmember Johnston points out, we're asking a lot from all of our departments, and economic development is definitely in the thick of it and has been with the principles that we've tried to operate on throughout the COVID crisis, which is to make sure that we're working towards a recovery that's equitable and sustainable for our local businesses, which of course impacts all of our residents and our ability to, you know, weather the pandemic and hopefully recover quickly. So this shortage is one that has been, you know, important for us to try to fulfill. It's a economic development, as you all know, is a newer department. It's a smaller department, but they carry a pretty big load.
Thank you. Any further questions on this? Okay, Ben, you want to take us back?
We're on A10.
Yeah.
A $33,000 request from fund balance for temporary lighting near homeless resource centers. We got new information after the staff report was published that permanent lighting was installed at the Gail Miller Resource Center this month, and the lighting was funded by public utilities from their street lighting budget. This funding would cover the temporary lighting that was previously in the location. Item A11 is a request for $250,000 from fund balance. And this would be for the city to provide funding to partner with the Department of Air Quality for lawnmower, snow blower, and string trimmer exchanges. The program would start in spring, and it would be for exchanging lawnmowers, and the snow blowers would be later next calendar year. The program allows residents. It's not available to businesses or nonprofits. Residents can bring old gas-powered machines to exchange for new electric equipment. And I should add, the Department of Air Quality has $1.2 million, and they're phasing it over 5 years. So there might be a future request of a similar amount to continue the city's participation, depending on the city's financial circumstances and the success of the program.
Okay. All right, next item.
A12, this is a request for $184,000 from fund balance for new positions in the attorney's office. The council may remember during the annual budget deliberations, 2 new positions were contemplated in the attorney's office, but were held off because of the financial uncertainty at the time. This request is for those 2 positions. One of them is a senior city attorney with a full year cost of $193,000. And this would only be for 7 months of funding through the rest of the fiscal year. That would be $113,000. The other position is an administrative assistant, and that would be $71,000 for the remaining 7 months of the fiscal year. Some council members expressed interest in adding a position to the city recorder's office. That is listed as well in the staff report. It would be an assistant city recorder, and the cost for 7 months is $58,000. The recorder's office is handling an increased workload from several reasons, some of which are changes to citywide programs like GRAMA and contract management, as well as the creation and staff support for the Racial Equity and Policing Commission. And this is an item that a straw poll is requested on.
And may I, Mr. Chair, address this?
Yes, please.
Okay. Now, Ben, I don't know that they need a straw poll on the whole thing. I think there was some advertising that they wanted to get going with part of it. I'm not sure. I could be wrong. Anyway, on the city recorder piece and on the attorney piece for the council added items, part of the workload increase, a significant part of it, is generated by the city council office. The city recorder's office is playing a major role in the WebEx meetings that we have and all of the additional transparency that we're working toward because of the pandemic. And so they actually have doubled the amount of staff that they have dedicated to the city council meetings. And then they're also, I think that at this point, the workload for the Police Equity Commission is significantly more than the workload for the city council. So without additional staffing they've doubled their work in terms of adding a new body that has more work than the council. And we've also doubled the amount of time we need from them. So I think that they're in a bit of a desperate state. And then also the city attorney's office is with the, we did never increase their staff when we changed to relying on them for all of the council ordinance work. So they have been absorbing that workload. Our requests of them, of course, have increased based on the needs right now in the city. So that's a little bit of the background.
And I need to clarify, Mr. Chair, I mentioned 3 positions. It's actually 4. It's 2 senior city attorneys, not 1.
Katie, do you or Cindy Lou, do you have anything that you would like to add?
I'd just like to start by thanking both the council and the mayor for your support of both of our offices. And, we are internal service facing and are here to serve all of you. And we really appreciate your thoughtfulness and your support in how we can have the resources to provide our client service to you all. Cindy Lou, I don't know if you have anything to add, but just wanted to express our gratitude.
Yeah, I think Cindy Jensen wrapped it up well. The only addition I would have is that what I'm calling constructive disruption is what has occurred in the recorder's office for the year 2020. It's a change in numerous processes. It requires workflow development and interdepartmental coordination with what Ben referred to in contract management, which has changed significantly, and our repository is going to change for the end of this fiscal year. We'll be shifting from our current service into Laserfish 100%. So that is the other piece that guides us.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Councilmember Fowler.
I would enthusiastically ask for a straw or present a straw poll here to support this appropriation for these FTEs. I know how hard both of these departments have been working this year, and probably could use an extra hand or two.
Okay. Any questions about the straw poll? All right, go ahead and indicate your support. And Councilmember Fowler is in favor, Johnston, Dugan, Mono, Rogers, and myself. And so that's unanimous support with Councilmember Voldemort absent.
That takes us to A14, a request for $45,000 from the Refuse Fund for supporting the 50% renewable energy in municipal operations project. This funding would allow professional and technical services related to the project. And it's a new large-scale renewable energy project with a completion date in 2022. This will bring the city a significant ways toward meeting the long-term sustainability goal of providing 100% of the city's municipal electricity needs with renewable energy resources by 2032.
Questions about that? Okay.
A15 is a request for $95,000 to restore the deputy director in the Human Resources Department. The council may remember that this position was eliminated as part of the annual budget. Information from Human Resources shares best practices and staffing ratios, which indicate that HR is understaffed for supporting the size of the city's workforce. And this would be a step toward restoring a better ratio between the department and the clients they serve, city employees.
Any questions? I have a question. Did we talk about the HR best practice numbers when we made the decision to get rid of the deputy? I don't remember.
We did not. That information was not available at the time. I suspect the current HR director may have some insight.
All right, Deb Alexander, do you want to help enlighten us?
My pleasure. I appreciate you giving me a chance to speak to it. I would express support, or I would express my appreciation for the support as well. As many of you may know, HR needs to do some rebuilding here in the next while, and as part of that, we need to address our staffing numbers. One of the reasons why we need those positions is because, as you all know, we provide internal service to all the departments as well. In order to do that, we have to be staffed at appropriate levels. The HR profession actually has entities every year that kind of survey what organizations do, and across the board, in a lot of respects, private sector and public sector aren't all that much different. So we can use those as a guideline, and those guidelines indicate that we're substantially lower than where we need to be. We're going to assess that as we go along. But that's kind of the basis. That forms the basis of this first request.
Okay, any other questions? All right.
A16, this is a request for almost $21,000 to provide 2 months of funding for a contract specialist FTE in the finance department. This position is being held vacant under the 6-month hiring freeze. The administration is requesting this position receive the funding because of a large spike in the number of contracts that finance is processing. Over the last 5 years, finance typically sees about 45, 47 contracts in the first 3 months of the year, and they've already seen over 83. This is partially related to the multiple emergencies, as well as the CARES Act money. Having that money is great, but it does require contracts in order to expend it. A17, this is a request for $662,000 for right-of-way repairs that were damaged in the September 8th windstorm. You might remember in budget amendment number 3, the council approved funding for debris cleanup as well as stump removal. That did not provide funding for concrete that was damaged. We're talking sidewalks, curb and gutter, driveway approaches, and concrete streets. The administration is currently using remaining funding from CIP last year. There was about $400,000 for the public right-of-way proactive repair program. That funding is running out, and that program received no new funding in CIP this year. So this request is for the administration to continue those concrete repairs. Some of this might be reimbursable by FEMA, but we don't have a timeline on when we'll get an answer from FEMA.
Okay.
A18, this is water park demolition, fencing, and security. It's the water park in Glendale. The funding is $580,000 for demolition and $275,000 for 24/7 security, fence repair, and replacement and boarding of the vacant buildings. The water park has been experiencing vandalism, theft, and frequent trespassing, hence needing to repair the fences that were cut. There have also been multiple fires, both man-made and natural. This represents a public safety hazard, which is why it's recommended for demolition. The buildings, the pools, and all of the hardscapes would be removed as part of the demolition. Completion would be sometime in the spring. There is a small revenue offset anticipated from a company coming in to remove the slides and refurbish them and then sell them off for other uses elsewhere. Typically, the security and the fence repair costs would be covered in the building maintenance fund. This is a fund that receives $200,000 each year from the surplus land fund. That allows for utility payments, maintenance, and cleanup at vacant city-owned properties. The building maintenance fund has already been depleted for this fiscal year, which is why the request is to use fund balance. There are 2 policy questions if the council would like to ask the administration if results are available from public engagement, especially with West Side neighborhoods, about future potential uses of the site. And if the council would like to ask the administration how city-owned vacant building maintenance will be funded for the rest of this fiscal year.
Anyone want to ask those questions? I have to say the graphic that we put out about the water park is pretty sad. It says like a pool that won't hold water and a water station that caught on fire. It sounds really sad.
Mr. Chair, the park is very sad. It's a very depressing place right now. If the administration has information on the outreach, I know that I've seen it, and they did a good job of outreach for a number of months or a number of weeks regarding whether or not to tear it down in the current condition. The question about what to do next is still ongoing, I believe. I think Dan Rick looks like it.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnston. Yes, so the public survey has closed and the results of that have been compiled. And I haven't done a deep dive into it, but I can tell you that there's overwhelming support for disassembling the water park and the infrastructure that's there. But as far as a future use, the public has weighed in, and it's sort of split on a couple of different ideas. There was some support for keeping or rebuilding a water park. And then there's also, about the same amount of support for another use. I know that our Parks and Public Lands Department is planning on doing a visioning exercise in the near future to be able to contemplate and analyze potential future uses.
Okay. Is there any environmental remediation that has to happen because of the chlorine?
No, that actually has already occurred, and that was paid for as well.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Oh, Councilor Johnston?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, there's a lot of question about why tear it down versus just rebuild the infrastructure. And we did a tour out there 2 weeks ago, Mayor, somewhere in there. And it's amazing how bad it's gotten even in 2 years since it was last open. It was bad before, but really, if there's anything of value in there, they've stripped it, or it's been torn apart. So it really is probably more cost effective if we want a water park to rebuild a new water park and try and salvage what's there. It's just that bad. Unfortunately.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah. Okay. Next item.
There are 3 more items, Mr. Chair. Item D3 is the second issuance of the voter-approved streets reconstruction bond. There are 2 more bond issuances that are planned, and we wanted to share a bit of good news. The true interest cost was only 1.6%, which is incredibly low and saves the city and taxpayers money. Item D5 is a request for a $15 million budget for landfill construction and planning. This is a pass-through. The city is reimbursed for it. And this is an item where the administration is requesting a straw poll today.
Okay. Would someone please make a straw poll suggestion?
Mr. Chair, I move the council support the CIP landfill construction and planning project.
Okay. Okay, any questions about the poll? All right, go ahead and indicate your support. All right, I have support from Councilmember Johnston, Fowler, Dugan, Mono, Rogers, and myself. That's unanimous with Councilmember Valdemoros absent.
The last item, Mr. Chair, is D6. This is an item we see every fall. It is a recapture of HUD grants that were not used in the previous year. And it's significantly larger this year than the last 5 years. particularly CDBG. It's $1.2 million. That funding will be added into the annual ongoing HUD grant awards, so it can be reused. So we just wanted to highlight for the council that the available CDBG dollars next spring, when you look at awarding them to individual community organizations, will have this 1.2 million in addition to the ongoing award. And that is it for Budget Amendment 5.
All right. Any overall questions, council members? Okay, we are a little bit late for our break, but we also have, we only have 2 items after the break. So I'm going to take a risk and still say that we get the 20 minutes. So if everybody can come back at 4:20, then we'll see everybody then. Okay, thank you. Agenda item number 7 is creating an appeal hearing officer system by replacing the Civil Service Commission and Employee Appeals Board. And leading us through this discussion, we have Ben Ledke from the City Council office, Katie Lewis, the City Attorney, and Dale Alexander, the Director of HR.
I'll give a quick introduction, Mr. Chair, and then I'll turn the time over to the administration. Staff forwarded earlier today some revisions to the ordinances that were previously transmitted, and the administration can speak to those changes. This is the first briefing, and a public hearing is scheduled for December 1st. The Civil Service Commission is an internal administrative review body that handles public safety personnel issues for the fire department and the police department. There's a second body called the Employee Appeals Board that handles disciplinary appeals for all other city departments. There are 2 ordinances before the council. The first ordinance would repeal the sections of city code that authorize the Civil Service Commission and the Employee Appeals Board. These 2 bodies would be replaced with an appeals hearing officer system. This is a model that the city currently uses for land use issues, and it has been quite successful. There are several attorneys that are on contract with the city, and they rotate through the cases for land use issues as they arise. And a similar model would be used for the disciplinary appeals. The second ordinance before the council is to establish a merit-based recruitment and promotion process for employees in the fire department and the police department. This is necessary because repealing the Civil Service Commission, that means the rules and regulations which govern recruitment and promotion of fire department and police department employees would also be gone and need to be replaced. The second ordinance has several benefits that are intended for the city to realize. Some of them are improving the city's competitive position in the market by speeding up job offers. And a recent example is the social worker program, which has had some struggles maintaining and reaching full staffing, in part because applicants that are offered jobs leave and take positions at other agencies because of the delay, sometimes weeks-long delay, in the Civil Service Commission approving those new hires. So this will help with maintaining full staffing and make the city more competitive in the job market. Another benefit is freeing up time for leadership and staff. There would be less involvement in terms of hours for the fire chief, the police chief, and their staffs to attend hearing officer proceedings compared to the Civil Service Commission. So this would allow leadership in those 2 departments and their staff to work on other city priorities. Another benefit is this lowers the barriers for new employees, and that allows more diverse approaches, different backgrounds, more experiences and ideas to come into the department, because it's easier for employees in other agencies to join Salt Lake City's departments. That's it for my intro. As I mentioned, the ordinances that are in the agenda packet, there are some potential revisions that were sent to the council this morning, and the administration can speak to those revisions, which are based on feedback from the police and fire union.
Okay. Oh, sorry, Councilmember Rogers, go ahead.
I guess, are we diving into questions, or are we going to let the administration talk about the changes? My main question was in regards to the changes that are coming forth. I still haven't had a chance to look at them in the ordinance, but I'm wondering why it took so long to get to the police as well as the fire unions to get their inputs.
Rachel or Katie or anyone want to jump in? Okay, go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Council Chair and thanks, Councilmember Rogers. I'm not sure of the timing that you're referring to. We did where we were able to transmit them the first draft of proposed ordinances before we transmitted officially to the City Council for their feedback. And then we've worked with them, mainly Deb and the Attorney's Office have worked with Local 81, who's been most interested in giving feedback over the past week, and that is reflected in the new drafts that we sent over to Council today. So we haven't gotten substantive feedback at all from SLPA or AFSCME at this point, but are of course still open to that.
Katie or Deb or Rachel, do you want to give kind of just an overview for our discussion, and then we can dive into questions?
Absolutely. Rachel, would you like me to start with the broad overview? Okay, great. So the Civil Service Commission is a city board that has been around since, as far as we can tell, the 1900s. And its purpose is twofold: to provide an appeal process for civil service employees, which are the employees in the fire department and the police department, and also to provide a review and approval process for recruitment and promotion for those civil service employees. It's separate from the MOU and the negotiations that occur between the administration and the City Council and the unions. So this is a separate entity than what happens with the MOUs. Those two purposes, the appeal and discipline purpose and the recruitment and promotion purpose, the administration believes can be served in a more modernized and efficient and in line with professional HR standards by repealing the civil service, eliminating it from the city, and creating an appeal hearing officer for employee appeals, both for civil service employees and for other merit employees. So both the Employee Appeals Board and the Civil Service Commission appeal process will be combined into one professional hearing officer process. There will be between 4 and 6 professional hearing officers who are legally trained and have employment experience. There will also be a replacement of the Civil Service Commission's other role, which is the recruitment and promotion role. Deb can speak in more detail to what their rules and requirements do right now, but that ordinance will again expedite and modernize the recruitment and promotion role that the Civil Service Commission is playing now for those civil service employees, so fire and police department employees. That's the broad description, and Deb, please feel free to jump in with more details.
Thanks. I'm happy to do so. As Katie and Rachel and Ben in his excellent summary mentioned, the benefits of the recruitment ordinances, the way that the administration is proposing them, is that it would allow us to be much more timely, and to start with, to be much more timely and responsive in terms of our ability to offer positions to individuals in fire and in police. So as Ben mentioned, one of the challenges it sounds like that we have had as a city is being responsive in hiring our social worker positions. One of the things that happens is that under the current system, any work that HR has done, and I'll just point out that HR has been the one who performs all of these functions, what would happen is we would do all the functionality in terms of going ahead and recruiting, but what the CSC ordinance requires is that we go ahead and check in with the commissioners about making any offers for those positions. What that means is that we are slowing down our recruitment process, often by weeks. And that's critical. That's been critical, and I believe will continue to be critical in terms of our ability to be responsive and act quickly to make offers to qualified candidates. So that's one of the benefits that we believe we will see from changing this. Another one would be our ability to attract diverse candidates into leadership roles in both fire and PD. And I'm happy to take some questions about what that would look like, but right now, the CSC rules preclude the city's ability to draw diverse applicants into leadership positions, into certain leadership positions in both of those departments. And what that has meant is that individuals selected into leadership are drawn from the same pool of candidates who come into the department fundamentally at the entry level. This would allow us the ability, when those departmental administrators choose, to draw from a more diverse and widespread. That is one way. I believe that everyone on the council understands that one way to change culture in any department, in any organization, is to change the makeup of its leadership, what it does and how it thinks and how it interacts. And we believe that this would be an essential element for changing the culture in these departments. Happy to chat more about that as you'd like.
All right. Any questions?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Councilmember Fowler.
I just want to say that I talked with fire union representatives when we first heard about this ordinance, and you know, I know that they kind of were taken aback and like, hey, where was our input? And then I had a small group meeting with Dan and Darren and Katie and Rachel and Deb and Jonathan, and the work that Deb and Jonathan in particular, no offense, Katie and Rachel, but I think you would agree, the work that they've done in communicating, at least with Local 81, is I can't thank them enough, because I think that the union, at least the fire union, and again, I know that they've reached out to the police union, but the fire union is greatly appreciative of having their input heard, and having Deb and Jonathan really listen and take into account what their input was and implement a lot of their input into the changes, the newer changes in the ordinance, is awesome. And I just want to say, again, I thanked them profusely in our small group meeting, but it's more fun in a public meeting to embarrass you and thank you for the work that you did in working with the union and continue to do with working and addressing their concerns. And so I appreciate that a lot. Just want to say thank you. And I know that it's been a lot of recent hard work and late nights, I'm sure, but thank you again.
Most welcome, and thank you for your acknowledgement.
And I'll just jump in and say, first of all, Jonathan Papasideris this has been a Herculean effort for him. So I want to be sure to acknowledge him, although he's not here today. And I also would direct you to the most recent drafts that have been sent to you, because those red line drafts do, we believe, reflect the discussions with Local 81, the fire union, and address the concerns as we heard them. And so we are hoping that, to your point, Councilmember Fowler, and also to address your concern, Councilmember Rogers, that it is a conversation and bringing those parties to the table for review and comment.
Well, I'm sure there are more questions.
Mine were already answered earlier on at 1 o'clock, so I have no more.
Okay. All right. Well, if not, then we can go ahead and move on. Unless Chief Lieb, you're here with us. Do you have anything you want to add?
Thank you, Council Chair. I just want to acknowledge also the efforts of Deb Alexander, Jonathan Papyrus, and I would also support the action to revise the current civil service standards. The way it's modeled, I think it's good for the city. I think it's good for the employees. So I would just second what Deb Alexander said about what is in it for the city, and Katie as well. Thank you for those comments. I just find the current system very cumbersome, very dated, and somewhat detached from what's really going on between labor and administration, and the process for taking care of these things from recruitment to discipline to promotions. It's just should be more streamlined, should be quicker, should be more practical. So I'm in favor of it. Thanks, Council, for considering it.
Okay. Oh, Councilmember Fowler.
Sorry, I did just think of one other thing. Have we, I imagine this, well, I guess maybe it doesn't. This civil service was only as it related to fire and police, correct? Okay, then I don't have a question. I did want to say go Lions, whatever, Chief.
Okay. Wow. Well, thank you, Katie and Deb and Chief Lieb and Rachel for this. We will go ahead and move on to agenda item number 8, which is demolition of dangerous or boarded buildings follow-up briefing. And taking us through this is Nick Tarbett, Council Policy Analyst, Orion Goff, Building Official, Blake Thomas, Director of CAN, Greg Mikolash, the Development Review Supervisor, and Antonia Padilla, Building Services Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Everybody's favorite question of 2020, right?
That's right.
So this is a follow-up briefing to go over responses from the administration to the questions the council raised during the September 15th work session briefing on the demolition ordinance. Later tonight, there will be a continued public hearing, and the council has the option to adopt the ordinance after that if you are ready to do so. The questions are outlined in the staff report, and we could go through them one by one if you would like to, or we could just go to questions if anybody wants to, has any specific questions about them. I will note that one of the major issues that the council had asked about were the fees for the vacant and boarded buildings. The response from the administration is that right now, the police and the fire fees are not included in the cost analysis for these fees. So staff has prepared some legislative intents that the council may consider adopting if you choose to want to adopt the ordinance tonight. That would allow you to put the bulk of the ordinance into play now, and then we can follow up with the fee schedule changes in the coming months. So do you prefer to go through these line by line, or?
Yeah, let's go ahead and go through. But you can just go quickly unless, and then we'll stop if there are questions.
Okay. So as I already stated, there was questions about what goes into the fee for the vacant and boarded buildings, whether or not the police and fire services are included. As we noted, they are not. So we've prepared a legislative action that could include that. There was a question about whether or not a disproportionate fee could be implemented for boarded buildings that are a persistent nuisance. The administration says that we currently don't have that, but that could also be something that could be looked into. So there is also a legislative action that would request research and follow up on that. A question was raised about whether it would be better to charge the fee per building instead of per lot. The administration responded that the attorney's office believes it would be difficult to accomplish as the parcel is the legal description, not for each individual building. So they're recommending that you stick with the current process. Also, they noted that there's 4 parcels out there that have multiple buildings on them. There was a question about the 18 terms that help define what a nuisance was, where that came from. The administration responded that these terms are part of the definition of dangerous building, and it's added verbatim from the uniform code which the state adopts. There was another question about providing some basic landscaping requirements. That is a change that the administration is recommending on lines 1523 through 1524 of the ordinance. It would include affirm the property will comply with the landscaping requirements for the zoning district that the property is located in as required under provisions of 21A48. Then there were some questions about whether or not the city could pay for the demolition of derelict homes and put a lien on the property and then have that paid once it's sold. The administration responded that the city uses liens on property all the time with some success. The downside is that it may be years before the lien comes to an issue for the owner or the new owner, usually when it's time to sell or refinance it. There's nothing in the current ordinance or the proposed ordinance that keeps the city from taking that action. However, there's currently no budget to pay for contractors, and it's not clear that there's the political will for the city to go into private property. As such, it's an invasive action. One related question to that with the legislative intents, there was during another discussion, some council members raised the possibility of the city purchasing these boarded and vacant buildings for rehab and then to put them into the affordable housing stock. That could be something like put them into the city's community land trust. So one of the legislative intents would be to request the administration review that and come back with some recommendations for the council to consider. That would mainly be a significant budget appropriation for that. And I believe that's it for what we were going on follow-up here. Any other questions on that?
No, I would just, sorry, are there any questions? I know Councilmember Mono, go ahead.
Thanks. I'm trying to think through the 2 legislative intents that are listed on the motion sheet. The one for the boarded building fees being increased for police and fire response, and the one for them disproportionate. That's sort of is that a both and or an either or scenario? And I'm trying to figure out, there's only a certain amount, we have to justify every fee that we pay or we charge. So if we charge it disproportionately, then the rest of the ones that are not causing that may not really have much of an increase at all. Is that accurate to say?
Yeah, I think you're correct. And first that we can do both. The first one is right now, police and fire services are not included in the fee. So the administration would do that analysis, do that cost justification so that they would be included in it. That would theoretically increase that fee potentially. Then this disproportionate fee, a second type of study that would be able to say, for the properties that are a consistent nuisance, can we increase those fees, upon more and more reports from the community or upon more infractions? And so that would be in addition to that base fee.
Nick?
Yeah.
It's Cindy. I'm not sure finance or the city attorney's office would have to help us with that disproportionate fee. It seems like it should be as you described, but it might be on a whole class of a whole category of boarded buildings or something like that. So that's probably something, if there isn't anyone on the call that can answer it today, we can get back on that but it's investigating both of them is what staff's suggesting.
I guess the clear question is, for our motion, we can do both, and it would just study both. It wouldn't enact anything, right?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or statements? Councilmember Johnson? Okay. I'm hopeful that we can move forward with this tonight, because there are a lot of residents who contacted us really urging and encouraging us to move forward. So if, I'm not going to ask for a straw poll, but if anybody has any concern about moving forward tonight, if you want to, is there any questions we can answer to assuage that concern? Okay, I don't see it. Oh, good. Thanks, John. Thanks, Andrew. Okay, great. That, council members, concludes our work session agenda for today. So unless, oh no, it doesn't. I'm sorry. We've got reports of the chair and vice chair. I don't have any reports. Andrew? Cindy Gus Jensen, do you have a report?
There is one announcement, but all of a sudden I can't find it. Oh, heck. I'll just email it out to you. It's something that we're going to put into your newsletters, if it's okay with you. And it might be the commission. Let's see. Oh, I know. Okay, sorry. It's the all the boards and commissions. This administration has been really good about doing outreach to all the communities about the boards and commissions, all the various opportunities that the city has. And so they've done a lot of that, and you have the opportunity to, if you'd like to, help share that information on a district by district basis, like a list of these are the boards that have openings in our district type of thing. So we'll work with you guys individually on whether you're interested in sending that out. But also now is a really good time if you do happen to have people that you know of in your communities that are interested or might be interested. Now would be a good time to provide their name to staff, and we can coordinate with the mayor's office to get information out to them. And that's it.
All right.
Cindy and Mr. Chair, I think there was one other aspect of the announcement that we were going to talk about, which was just more of a public information that on December 1st, we'll be having a more comprehensive housing discussion. I don't know if you want to fill in the detail on that, or if someone knows more than I do about it, just to kind of give everyone a heads up that that was coming.
Okay. I can do that.
Oh, okay.
I don't know how I missed that, but sorry. And I'm in the dark. I don't know what's wrong with me, but I look like I'm disguised in the witness protection program. There are several issues that are coming, that have been coming to the council that are either private petitions or initiatives of the administration or follow-ups on previous council requests. And they all tie to housing and the makeup of our city's neighborhoods and that type of thing. So since there are several, there's I think at least 6 items that could have a significant impact. The council has been moving those forward individually on their own tracks, but now on December 1st is going to try to bring those together in a more comprehensive policy conversation about how they would all work together and what the lay of the land would be in our neighborhoods based on all of those various ordinances that are on their way through the process. So we're hopeful that that will be a good conversation. It will also be an opportunity to kind of do a bit of a halfway checkpoint on the master plan that the city has for housing, which is Grow Salt Lake, I believe. And then I think there's also a report from the Housing Authority, their annual update to the city. So the December 1st meeting will have some substantial housing conversation. That's it.
Councilman Romano?
Thank you. On that December 1st conversation, it sounds like it's specific to housing, and I wasn't sure if, like, for instance, the discussion we've been having about gateway mixed use or form-based urban neighborhood 3 or the downtown heights study is relevant to that. But those are also things that I think have a bearing on what our neighborhoods will look like. So I wasn't sure if that is that planned to be included in that, or is that something we should discuss at a different time, or
There was at least one in there that I don't think we have included, but we certainly can include it. And then it ties to housing, but like the parking ordinance and things like that. We're not including the demolition ordinance because that was on a faster track, but the other items are all at least partway through the council process. And so this is just a chance to look at the comprehensive policy. So we'll add what you mentioned.
Okay. Now I think we have reached the end of our work session agenda, and so we will be we'll reconvene for our formal meeting at 7 o'clock, and see everybody then.
Thank you.
Welcome and thank you for joining us for another episode of Capital City News.